We're here, thrust into existence, apparently alive. But as consciousness is, as of yet, still a mystery, where here actually is likewise remains enigmatic. Nonetheless, our consciousness is experiencing something here. But what exactly? Step now thus into the DiMENSiONSCAPE, MG.
Welcome to the second episode. I'm Gary7, bringing the supernatural to the S and putting the glitch in the G. I unapologetically uphold and maintain through personal, miraculous experiences that there is more to this world of ours than meets the eye. And through these testimonies affirm with all that is within me, blood to bone, that Jesus Christ exists and is indeed God and Messiah. Now, originally when I conceived this show, I had planned on dropping only one bomb personal story every episode to stretch them out for as long as I could. Certainly, I've had so many supernatural experiences, I've almost forgotten some. Still, they are limited. As of today, Saturday, July 1st, 2023, because of an experience from about a year ago, I'm becoming more and more sure every day that I received another message from God spoken to my spirit. Now, I'm not going into detail publicly on this one. It wouldn't mean much to anyone who doesn't know me anyway. To get to the point, I don't believe believers have much time before the rapture really does happen and warp everybody's sense of reality. So I decided tonight to pull out all stops. This episode, I'm telling all my best, most shocking, mind-twisting stories. I believe God gave me these amazing experiences for one reason and one reason only, to grant me testimony to blend with the blood of the Lamb to overcome the devil. Every one of these incredible tales is being told as I personally remember them happening. Now, let's get cracking. I've never been a gangster, and I've never been a thug. But when you're raised in one of the most outrageous cities of an outrageous country like the USA, it's not outrageous to find yourself in life or death situations. Thus, I've been so close to death so many times I can honestly say I know what the Grim Reaper's breath smells like. My first tale of the night details the most prominent of all such events in my life. Nothing else even comes close to what I'm about to share. The core of this story may seem utterly unbelievable, but believe me, it happened just the way I'm telling it, and every breath of it is true. It's the tale of the night Lucifer came gunning for me, and I don't mean that figuratively. By all the laws of man, nature, and science, I shouldn't be here to tell it. But because God said, "Not today, Satan," I am here to testify to Jesus' greatness, goodness, and unbelievable power. I call this evening's first story simply Bullet Time. In the mid-90s, 95 or 6, when I was about 30, on Super Bowl Sunday, in the often overlooked Midwestern state of my birth, I was leaving the apartment of an important female in my life. Our relationship was probably not what you're thinking, but also probably not far from it. While I honestly can't remember what we were doing in her home that night, I certainly clearly remember what happened after I left, and will remember until I enter my last dark night, no longer drawing breath, as the following events came a hair's width of making this night that night. Pulling out of her complex parking lot at about midnight or so, I turned right onto the long main street that led away from the beach and the complex. As I did, I casually noticed a car pull out following my turn directly behind me. Any traffic this late on a Sunday was a little unusual. Its timing coinciding with mine also felt worth noticing. You see, where I come from, you learn to stay observant because anything might happen, anytime, anywhere. This tale is more than proof of that. Too many of you who hail from such neighborhoods already know too of what I speak. Those of you who don't, just be glad. I noticed the car behind me as I make my way the mile or so to the first traffic light. I noticed it stayed behind me the whole time, and I monitored it the whole time. Here, I have to admit, I believe what the Bible calls the spirit of discernment had a hand in my spidey sense, if you will, picking up on something being off so early. There was evil in the air that night, and I could feel it. Now I began trying to talk myself out of thinking anything was amiss. As I continued, my rational mind insisted, so I noticed a car. Whatever. A car heading my way doesn't necessarily mean trouble. And that was rational and true. But you see, the problem with receiving spiritual information from God, as you will soon see, is that it's rarely rational. It won't make sense if you try to run it through a computer. You just have to take it on faith. Now, that road may have been straight, but it was long, like 8 miles long. When I reached that first light after passing no other cars along the way, I noticed the car change lanes and pull up slowly beside me. Instincts tell me to look over at its driver for threat assessment. I do, and lock eyes with senseless, deep, burning hate. A young man I'd never seen before glared viciously at me from the vehicle next to mine, and I met and boldly held his stare in a provocative what kind of way. The green light breaks our competition of looks, and I pull off, not suspecting soon we'd be in another kind of competition, the deadly kind. Now convinced there is a threat, I definitely keep my eyes on the car. I soon reached the second and last light before the comfortable 4-lane street chokes down to 2, becoming a 4 to 5 mile stretch through a thick, foreboding, unlit forest. Not only did no street or traffic lights await, but no intersections interrupt its lengthy 2-lane passage for miles either. Nothing awaited in its black wood but a narrow, dark, icy road and death. The only real feature of this no man's road were the 3 to 4 foot ditches on either side that would happily flip any car foolish enough to stray too far off the narrow path. Eventually, the road terminated at a T intersection just after briefly rising over a slightly elevated freight train track 4 or so feet high. From there, one could gain access to the freeway with a right turn. I observed the car approaching mine, waiting for the green light to get me away from this ever-increasing threat. Something's coming. I can feel it. I watch the hateful driver and notice this time he chooses to stay behind my car rather than pull alongside it. Red flag. My eyes see his headlights in the rearview mirror as he not only slows forebodingly directly behind me, but rather than stop at a normal distance from my vehicle, creeps closer and closer to my rear bumper, warning me to get ready. Sure, it's coming. I plan to peel out. But there are cars crossing in the perpendicular intersection ahead of me on their green. Still, needing to give myself every chance I can think of, I uncomfortably put my left foot on the brake and the right just over the gas, anticipating the worst for maximum speed in case a quick takeoff is called for. And it was. The next thing I knew, I heard thunder detonate the cold air of the night and felt my rear window shower me. His Glock roared, sending hot lead past my head. That was the starting gun. At light speed, I make the only play I have. I release the brake and simultaneously stomp the gas so hard I don't know why the pedal doesn't go clean through the floor. Immediately, my car ripped through the intersections, red light and a blur. My reaction had been fast, apparently faster than that psycho anticipated, as I was in the dark stretch ahead in moments. This gave me a noticeable head start I intended to take full advantage of. My life depended on it. But that turbo was fierce, and soon he was in hot pursuit of me. Hot lead tracing my car all the while. As I gunned that huge car down that dark road, I was aware of the many dangers awaiting me. Speeding across snow and ice I couldn't see. Deep ditches on the sides of the road, ready to flip my car, easily snapping my neck. Then, of course, were the countless trees, death traps in the dark just off the street, ready to kill me should I lose control and the car wasn't flipped in a trench. Just hitting one could easily cripple me for life if I was lucky enough not to be killed by one. Of course, lead-lined death, breathing down my neck, was a non-environmental risk I was forced to face as well. The other crazy thing was, in spite of all this, my demeanor was calm, measured, and relaxed. Well, maybe not relaxed the way I was back at the apartment, but still extremely calm considering. Yes, I was fleeing for my life, hoping he wasn't a good shot, but I was as collected as James Bond all the while. Weird. How in the thick of all this could I be so calm? I found myself nervously wondering if I was going into shock from a bullet my body refused to acknowledge. Or maybe it was nothing more than just adrenaline, giving me an edge so I could get out of the situation alive. Though I didn't really think that was the case and felt normal, I knew it was plausible. Of course, I couldn't be sure without checking. But right about then, I certainly wasn't about to. Please, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to show how cool or fearless I am. In fact, I think I was in shock, but a delayed kind. After it was all over, the police questioned me, but let me go when no connection between my would-be killer and I could be established and no motive ascertained. That was good, because later I got to shake so bad I couldn't have held a pen well enough to sign my name. But in the car, back in the heat of the moment, there was no ducking, no dodging, or even trying to lower my head to avoid bullets. I just sat comfortably in my driver's seat sweet spot the way I always did. Remember that. We'll return to this seemingly unimportant point later. And when we do, you'll realize that fact is the whole point. By then, the car was up to about 90 and climbing, as my instincts and the Holy Ghost had prepped me for action in time to grant me a small head start. It had paid off, too. Now, I was too far ahead of him and deep into the forest, clearly out of range. By now, almost midway to the T intersection and the elevated train track up ahead, I was making a good run. The distance the Holy Ghost and those old horses granted me was not, however, enough to convince me I was, so to speak, out of the woods. He was still back there in a car faster than mine and still coming for my blood. I had absolutely no intention of slowing down. That's what made what happened next so bizarre. Still about halfway to the railroad tracks up ahead, far in the distance, my eyes caught through seemingly endless forest darkness an unexpected but welcome sight. Police lights. Knowing the road well, I knew there was probably only one place the police could be, at or near the railroad crossing. I couldn't believe it. For once, a cop when you needed one. Now, why they were there or for how long was another question entirely. Regardless, it was then my flight took on a new sense of hope I hadn't felt since the first bullets flew. It was clear I had to get to them before one of two things happened. They left or a bullet got to me. The problem was I was still probably over a mile away. This meant one thing to my desperate mind. I needed speed. I pushed that car even harder then, if such a thing was possible, as reaching those police was my only answer. Maybe, I thought, if I could only reach them before they left, I wouldn't have to chance that crazy wrong-way highway maneuver I was planning. I absolutely had to make it to them. So I steeled myself to forget the coming death from behind and try to focus on maintaining control of the vehicle. So, Just as I may be 2 blocks from the tracks and feeling good that I now have a plan that doesn't require attempted suicide, another unexpected but not altogether unbelievable thing happens. The Holy Ghost speaks to me, and it's clear. Not in my ears, mind you. I didn't hear his voice. The Spirit speaks to the heart, to the spirit. At least that's the way he always has in my life. You may scoff at my certainty that it was indeed the Spirit of the Almighty himself, and that's fine. People claim God talks to them every day when he doesn't. I get it, and I know how that sounds. I won't try to defend that statement and sell you on the idea that it really was God, because by the end of this tale, that fact, the fact that Jesus was riding with me that night, will have sold itself. So, what did the Spirit say? In his familiar, small, still voice, a voice I could easily mistake for my own thoughts, he tells me one thing in 2 words: slow down. Now think for a second. In this situation, what would you have thought? What would you have done? Slowing down obviously seemed like the last thing in the world I would have wanted to do at that moment. But this was not my first rodeo. God had by this point in my life spoken to me several times. And as John 10:27 quotes Christ as saying, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." But let's also be real. Let's get down to where the rubber meets the road. Being told in a high-speed chase while running from a stranger trying to kill you to slow down, effectively surrendering a hard-earned lead on your would-be murderer, especially when your apparent salvation, the police, are in sight, let's just say didn't sit right with me. Would it have with you? But then again, I knew and know God's voice. I was sure it wasn't just my imagination, but still needed to be sure. After all, not 5 minutes had passed since all this started. It was happening so fast. As I cruised at about 100 miles an hour, I calmed my doubting mind and connected with my God in my spirit and simply, honestly asked him, "Lord, is that you? Are you sure you want me to slow down?" All he said in response was simply, Yes. Now, if you will allow me a slight pause for the cause here, I'll point out a lesson I've learned over time and through experience. But first, I don't want to imply this is for sure the only way you'll ever be able to know. But a clue in identifying the voice you hear as God communicating with you is often what the voicer feeling says. Often, it will tell you to do something in a given situation that either you would never do, don't want to do, or think you can't do. You see, God isn't you. His thinking isn't based on rationality or logic from assessing and sifting through limited data like ours is. God's thinking is based on knowing. Like Isaiah 55:8 says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways." So while it may not make a shred of sense to you, don't discount it as momentary insanity. In a lot of cases, daring, and baby, I do mean daring, to trust that voice will open a door to miraculous things you never thought you'd see. This was such a case. So what now? I slow down and let this madman get back in range? This is one of the crucial parts to the event, and indeed, to my relationship with my Father. I felt that I had heard him and that he had confirmed it. But now came the really hard part, the part that's always hardest of all, having the faith to actually obey at a time when doing so would seem to go against every ounce of common sense you have. In this case, possibly even an act of suicide. The issue was, did I trust God enough to obey him at a moment like this? It wasn't easy to do. But the fact was, I knew I could trust him, and I trusted him with my very life. So I took my foot off the gas and immediately felt that aircraft carrier of a car start to slow. 100 to 95 to 80, and eventually even on down to 60. Now I'm approaching the tracks, a decent distance away, but close enough to see the police car on the opposite side, and still coming up on it fast. All I could see of the police unit were its lights, though, because, as I said, the tracks rested on an elevation about 3 or 4 feet higher than ground level. I'm also seeing the headlights of my attempted assassin closing in on me quickly from behind, starting to enter range. In mere seconds, I'm up the side of the railroad track's small hill, and then, and only then, do I see the scene and situation for what it really is. Only then do I understand for the first time why the police were there so long. There had been a car crash between the intersection and the tracks. The cars were still in the middle of the street, and the police have shown up in 2 units. The one I saw, flashing its lights, was parked parallel to the tracks, blocking the street, while a second I hadn't seen was parked to my right on the side of the street, perpendicular to the tracks facing them. More or less inside the rough L the parked police cars formed, the 2 cars set, occupying the last few feet of road before the intersection. It looked like a chaotic parking lot. There is no way I can continue straight. I can hardly believe my eyes. Still doing about 50 as I hit the tracks, realizing there are only a few meters before I cause a 5-car pileup. Now, I like to think I'm a better than average driver. Well, it took every bit of my skill to keep that huge 2 1/4 from ramming that police car broadside. As good a driver as I like to think I am, though, while I managed to jerk the wheel to the right, missing the car blocking the street, there was no way at the speed I was traveling, and in the distance I had, no more than 10 meters, to avoid a collision altogether. My God-given quick reflexes only allowed time for but one jerk of the wheel to the right, directly towards the second unit parked on the side. I didn't hit the one just over the tracks blocking the street, but the one parked on the side simply could not be avoided. After my car collided with the parked cruiser, I was out and running over to the policeman standing in the middle of the parking lot. He didn't say anything as I quickly approached him. I did. "There's a car chasing me, shooting at me, and he's coming fast." I half shouted the warning at the policeman, then ran to the opposite side of the road to await my pursuer's fast approaching vehicle. The cop said and did nothing, simply looking at me as if in shock himself from the suddenness of my car flying out of the dark and crashing into one of their cars. Not something he was prepared for, probably. Understandable. As we silently glared at each other, the maniac's car approached. You could hear it, coming in the dark, the gunning engine, the rushing wind. It was coming in fast and hot. Then it was there. With intense velocity, he broadsides the police cruiser, cataclysmically. The collision is intense and fills the cold night air with the deafening sound of impacting steel, folding and grinding. Silence returned then, suddenly, as the T-Bird's T-boning stopped. He never even tapped the brakes. God clearly didn't tell him to slow down. This would, if it ended here, be quite a story. It doesn't. The most shocking and unbelievable facet of this jewel God allowed me to experience has yet to be told. The cop apparently then snaps out of his shocked stupor and is understandably instantly furious and yelling. He and the other officer, a female, cautiously approach the smashed Thunderbird. I follow. They open the driver's side door, and inside is the maniac, face planted into the steering wheel. Covered in glass that was once his windshield, he weakly lifts his head, and I can see that his eyes and mouth hold a great deal of the windshield. Blood is everywhere. I don't pity him. He weakly says, indicating me with a twisted trigger finger, "He was shooting at me." I immediately counter, "Yeah? Well, check whose car has the bullet holes and whose car has the gun." They do. And while the lady cop heads over to my car, the male shines his flashlight on the floor, revealing the Glock just under the mangled maniac's legs. While she is gone, I wonder about the trouble I must be in for crashing into the police car. I wonder how much the damage to my own car is going to cost me, and in my heart curse the madman. I see immediately my car took the worst of this one. Not destroyed and still drivable, but my fender is mangled. Swallowing and accepting my car's damage, but glad to be alive, I look to see the damage I did to the cruiser. When I do, I can hardly believe my eyes. The damage to the police car is still more evidence of God truly being my co-pilot this night. The only damage, and I mean not a scratch more, was one broken headlight. Not even the paint was scratched. I stare in silent amazement. It would not be the last time that night. Moments later, she returns and without hesitation or permission begins touching the back of my neck and hair. Surprised by this, I stiffen under her hands. She quickly asks, clearly alarmed, "Are you shot?" I am stunned by the question and get nervous at her asking it, remembering my strange calm during the chase and shooting. I immediately remember wondering if I had, but never had time to check. I didn't like this. Was there a reason she was looking for wounds? Was there blood in the car when she had checked it I hadn't had time to notice? I don't think so, I nervously said. She looked at me strange for a moment, then said, "Have you seen your car?" "No," I said. "Well, I think you need to." With that, we approached. Those few meters felt far farther as I tried to feel my body from the inside. Tried to take inventory on my body to ascertain whether I had been hit or not. I didn't feel anything wrong, and she didn't have blood on her hands, but I still couldn't help feeling a dark nervousness about what I might see, about what had her so spooked. Did pools of my own blood await me in that car? When we got there, I got my first look at the car in the light, and the more I saw, the more nervous I got. The car's rear window was completely gone. Not exactly a shock, considering the glass down my shirt. The trunk was full of bullet holes as well. I made my way forward to the front seat and was thinking how blessed I had been when she upped the ante. She said, "Look here," and motioned towards my seat's headrest. I looked at it and my blood ran cold. There was about 4 inches of stuffing hanging out driver's side towards the steering wheel. I leaned in and looked at the headrest's rear side, and sure enough, the entry point created a smooth hole, exactly dead center of the headrest. That one, I darkly thought, had my name on it. I then wondered where it went because it didn't take a ballistics expert to see clearly where it came through the car. My curiosity caused a quick look to the left and I saw its exit point, one neat hole in my front windshield. Now I was really freaked. A bullet had gone clear through the headrest of the seat, and the seat I'd been sitting in, the place my head had been. No wonder she was nervously checking me when she got back to me. I stood there, wondering how this bullet could have possibly missed me, and decided that I must have just been sitting low enough in the seat for it to go right over my head. But it didn't seem high enough in the headrest, nor the back of the seat tall enough to rise above my head. I decided to test my over-the-head theory and sat down. I was sure to sit the way I always sat, exactly the way I was positioned during the shooting, and was shocked when I began tracing a straight line to the hole. Doing so forced me to grapple with possibilities that got me dizzy, that earned this story its premier place in the DiMENSiONSCAPE. I knew my head had been in that exact spot the entire time I was driving. Immediately I recalled being so calm, never moving or ducking my head, even once. Unable to come to grips with the facts my eyes showed me, I traced the path again with my finger. And again, the path traced a straight line from the headrest through the base of my neck, right where the spine and skull meet, to the hole in my windshield. There was no question. It was clear. That path would have taken the bullet directly through my head. No ballistics expert necessary. So what happened to the bullet? It sure hadn't hit me. The only 2 possibilities were equally impossible and constituted either the biggest glitch I've ever heard of or divine intervention. Either it curved around me like in the movie Wanted, within the 2 or 3 centimeters between the front of the headrest and the back of my head, only to then correct course to end up where it should have, exiting the car directly in front of my nose, or it momentarily vanished between the headrest and my head. You decide what you will, but I know what I think, and it was God. whether the bullet traveled straight and momentarily disappeared or curved around me. Either way, I give God alone the glory for this one. As for the maniac, the male policeman was furious and pulled me aside for answers. He asked me what this was all about, surmising I had wronged the unfortunate fellow in the arena of money, drugs, or a woman. I asked him, had he ever heard of random violence? Well, this was it, I said. Whilst the first two were absolutely not the case, I never knew for sure about the third. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Or maybe it was a mix of the third and something else, something entirely demonic. You see, the young man in the other car, I learned in the coming weeks through the ensuing police investigation, was a mental patient. Apparently, that very night, he'd escaped, stolen a car and a gun, and gone on a random rampage, eventually leading to me. No doubt about it. This caper had Satan's hoofprints all over it. But God said, "Not this bullet time, Satan." No sooner than he had uttered these words, the stormy, overcast skies parted over him, and a beam of sunlight shone down directly at his front. Tyrell looked back to the water as he could now see into the dark depths, and to his amazement, shock, and ultimate horror, he beheld what the beam revealed. He was standing directly over Arturo's body. For this evening's final tale, I thought I would end where I began, in a matter of speaking, with a story of my own. This is a simple tale, but still rather unlikely utilizing conventional logic for explanation. I can only make sense of it in light of Schrodinger's cat, quantum wave dynamics, and reality shaped by mental perception. I call this one, Thanos Can't Fly. While walking alone at a busy public pool, I passed happy families. I saw mothers and fathers, sons and daughters enjoying the warm sun and each other.